I remember after about 2 or 3 weeks, and I had done my first assembly of the German battle scene, that I took it out to Ridley and I showed it to him. Really rough, I mean rough, it was long, it was probably like 19 minutes long, everything in it, but the structure was there. And I showed it to him with music, with sound effects, and he loved it. I mean, he was beaming. And Branko was in there, and he says, he looks at me, we have it, huh? We have it.
It's one of the most beautiful battle sequences that I saw in this kind of movies, because it's so full of energy, and the director put the camera on places that you will not expect. And actually inside this battle sequence we have also romantic too, because we have a little bird in the middle of this big battle, and in the middle of blood and fire is this little bird what the Maximus is watching, and I think he's also in this moment romantic, thinking of his wife and his son.
And I was really proud, you know, that he was so happy. And he said, you know, I haven't felt this good, you know, since Blade Runner, which meant a lot. I mean, he was really enjoying himself, and he felt that he had something special there. To him, that was like, you know, a great beginning. Gave him a lot of energy to continue and going through North Africa and then Morocco. Always tireless in terms of improving the script.
Stop, turn around.
Doug Wick wasn't able to be in Morocco for most of the shoot because his daughter was quite ill. So I would meet every night with Ridley. We'd sit in, we'd work on dialogue and scenes. And actors would come to me, and we'd sit with Russell. I mean, it was all over the place. We'd sit with Russell, we'd talk with Russell about dialogue and Russell about character, then we'd sit with, you know, with Ridley and try to, you know, keep the main thread in shape, but mold it to the moment as we went along.
I caught myself up. So I was catching myself up continually through the film, so there was a lot of writing done 2 and 3 and 4 days before, a week before, the night before.
We get done about 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning, faxed it over to Walter Parks at DreamWorks, who was awake and, you know, feeling, you know, frisky, and he would write back his notes, we'd get those done, and then Ridley would be on his way to the set, and we'd hand him the pages.
Receiving it the next day, walking on the set, putting up with the barrage of insults, saying, how can you turn up with words like this late in the day? And me saying, I don't give a shit, you don't understand how long I've been up all night. I'm directing a movie as well, so all this was going on. And rightly so, but at the same time, eventually I've got to defend my position.
Because of time difference and the difficulties of telephone communication, whatever, Ridley and I began a kind of a correspondence.
I was dealing specifically, really, throughout all of that with Walter. And it developed, I think it actually mutually developed almost into good fun. It was so scary, it was almost fun.
Which would be the sorts of conversations that a producer or a studio head would have with a director normally when you walk down to the set and say, well, what do you think? And remember, because part of, I felt my job during the shooting was to try to help everyone remember what we got into this in the first place for it. Because you're in the heat of battle and he's dealing with such extraordinary difficulties and actors who are so putting themselves out on the line that it's quite easy to forget what are the big thematic issues.
So there was this constant toing and froing, for the most part by fax.
I would look at a rewrite that came out of a rehearsal and I'd even have the misuse, and then I'd write him 2 pages about it. It would be faxed to him and he'd read it and he says, this is rubbish. Then he'd write back his story to me and I'd get his writing. And we had this really very intimate and very energetic conversation that took place transatlantically. I think it was at the very end that I put them all together in a book and bound it and called it Letters to the Front and had it delivered to him. And it does provide a kind of an interesting insight.
I saw it as my job to keep fighting, to say, you are wrong if you do this. I don't believe people will like the character. I don't believe the plot makes sense. And if you keep fighting your corner, then eventually people will take it in. And so I would keep fighting. Ridley tended to have a reaction that was very much to do with the dynamics within a scene. He's got a kind of remarkable genius for knowing how a scene works. So he would look at it as the scene, how he was going to shoot it, and how the emotions were going to play within that scene. Doug Wick and Walter Parkes were both looking at the great story all the time. And Walter was a writer himself originally, and sort of still is a writer, really. Very much sees these things. So Doug, Walter, and I would argue out, where are we going? What are we planting for the viewer? What expectations are we arousing? How are we going to satisfy them? How are our characters evolving? And then, of course, when it got to the set, then people would start to argue about it as well, because everybody knew the script was in play.
People are constantly experimenting on how the script is written. So there are nuances in it that develop as Ridley sees the characters developing. The producer came up to me yesterday and he said, Oliver, coming from a coast, there's going to be some rewrites for next week. So I give them to you either tonight or over the weekend. So I say, fine. So listen, I'm a professional actor. Just give me something and I'll do my best to interpret it.
My main contribution during that period was reassuring everyone that the movie was going fine, and getting the lines and the character and the piece working for both Ridley and Russell.
We've had a lot of difficult things on this film, right? Our script is being operated by committee, and that is not the best way to do it. It's actually the antithesis of how you should make a feature film. Detail and collaboration, absolutely, 100% yes. But at the end of the day, there has to be a captain of the ship. So we have a little bit of that going on. The positive end of that, though, is that every single person on the committee is absolutely into doing the movie.
Every time we had one of these collisions, the scenes were better for it. Because, you know, both men were willing to give just enough to accommodate what the other needed.
There was always, through the early stages of the film, you know, a sort of battle to get each section shot and each section contained, and it was like a day-by-day process, really, where Ridley was, you know, reworking things on the script with the actors and working with the artists, working with Russell to push the characters to points which they, you know, wanted to get them to. And I think that really became a part of what made the film so good, in a sense. I mean, I really don't know, that's all bullshit usually, but I do, because having stood outside trailer doors and in rooms and meetings and listening to the way these guys sort of fought to, you know, make these characters real and make this story progress.
I'd do my first month ever in Morocco, 5 weeks, and we'd built the Roman, I'd wrecked and chosen Kasbahs, which are the houses of Oliver Reed, the slave boss. Then a village called ABH, which I've now used twice since then. ABH, which would be the Roman arena in the provinces, where we'd see him earn his colors as a warrior in the arena.
That was shot in Ouarzazate, which is just below the Atlas Mountains, and there's a hilltop town which Ridley had looked at before. On G.I. Jane, we'd looked at possibly shooting a sequence near there, but because of restrictions, we weren't able to shoot there.
We scouted several different countries, and Ridley loves Morocco, and he was very interested in the idea of shooting around Ouarzazate. What we found around Ouarzazate was an existing village where we could actually build this flea-bitten arena right into the side of an ancient Moroccan village. And Arthur Max did such a beautiful job that when you went to the location, this kind of old arena built out of natural mud Moroccan bricks looked like it had been in the side of this village for centuries.
And that was a pretty amazing sequence there, really, because we had at one stage we had like 5,000 crowd there for the big crowd scene, and Maximus has become, you know, a gladiator of renown through this part of the province of the Roman Empire. And then we use the town as well, where the gladiators get brought through and all the red dye is dripping down on them. We use the town in these alleyways and stuff that overlook it. But that was our main set. We also shot in another place which became Proximo's school, where first introduced the character of Oliver Reed.
I think the appeal of Morocco is the culture. I've shot now Black Hawk down there in the town in Saleh, and now just finished a long shoot on the Kingdom of Heaven. The artisans are great, you know, they can build so it looks like real stone.
I think we built almost 30,000 mud bricks using local techniques, local materials, and baked in the sun, simply mud mixed with straw, cast in a mold and left to dry. And that was the joy of that project, using the indigenous vernacular style of construction, and worked very well. It melted right into the existing landscape.
Very rarely do you have to worry about the weather. And you get amazing colors here, and you get moon sets. We get moon sets, as you've probably seen as you get onto the film set. You know, the moon is setting, and then the sun comes up on the other side, and then as you leave, the sun is setting and the moon is coming up.
And it was, hard work there in the desert, bussing everyone in to watch this massive scene, and they can't even see what we're really shooting, but getting them to cheer and shout Maximus, Maximus. And really they can't see anything, and never mind who Russell Crowe is and where he's doing in the scene.
One more, thank you. One more. Action!
And again, in this scene, we bring this sort of this dirty reality, this sort of, the unpleasantness of what people do when they're going to go and fight in an arena to the death, and they're not experienced fighters. You're terrified, you're scared, and I think that was the thing in there as well, the brutality of this.
Outside in the actual arena, we have 10 gladiators, all armored up, ready to go, big weapons, swords, axes, things like that. Outside in the pen, we've got 16 guys, 8 pairs. One of them has their left hand chained to the guy with his right hand. The guy with his right hand free has a sword. The guy with the left hand free has a shield. They come out into the arena with a crowd shouting for blood, and the 10 guys in the center just try and decimate the guys coming out. They just have to try to survive. These things are dangerous, especially because the way I choreograph, it took a couple of days to choreograph and then a week or so of rehearsals to bring it up to speed with all the stunt guys. You work it slowly, you build it up very slowly over the first couple of days. You start to put the speed in. Some of the weapons will be rubber if it's particularly near the fingers and things like that, so you use rubber weapons. Most of the time you try to use the metal weapons so it feels more authentic. And you just have to try, especially with so many of the guys actually fighting very close to each other. You just have to rely on everyone knowing what they're doing, and that the rehearsals have gone well, the choreography is good, and everyone's in the right position.
A lot of technique in fighting and remembering in which way you started. And it is not only that there are 2 guys who are fighting. You have actually 20, 30 people fighting to the same time. And then you have the audience. You have 2,000 people, even in Morocco in the arena, are screaming and shouting at you. And the doors opened, and we right away got attacked. So you have your fight and some special effects. There are some explosions coming up, and blood is all over the place.
As you run through with Jaimin in front and you following, then you swivel like that, don't you? And what? Yeah, you do. Because you're here, Jaimin's here. And what happens is you split, because Jaimin got to there, then he came to here.
Yeah, but that move there shouldn't happen.
Okay.
We get to here,
yeah.
and we go to there,
right.
And then we move together like that.
That's what I mean.
This is the axe fight, that's the net fight. So you've got that fight going just this side, that's it. So that's the center one. Ridley does love that sort of closeness and everybody in there really getting in. and into the dirt and your face rubbed into. I mean, he wants that kind of feel to it. So that's where it becomes quite tricky, because you are. It's even more risk because of the way he wants the fights. And it's good in a way because it looks much better on screen. The thing is, unfortunately, there's slightly more risk inherent with it. Russell is very good. He picks it up very quickly. He's very physical. I went to Australia to start with, spent a couple of weeks with him rehearsing out there, so we were just going through the basic movements out there, getting him used to the sword and how he moved. But luckily for us, he's a very physical guy, so he's got a very good memory, so he learns the moves quickly.
3 is funny, because by the third one, it's going okay, but then you need another 3 to get the one that
Why not start like that and start working like that?
And I think instead of cutting, if we get to the end where there's no NG, work back, just go back and just keep going until the magazine runs out. And that's where we get the sword up, through the hand, over you go, and smack.
Russell is a pretty intense guy, so the guys around him have got to be really on the ball, because, you know, he is going to go for it. You know he's going to go for it straight off. As long as he sticks to the moves, everyone's okay. He comes out and he doesn't hold back. He's swinging, but he's swinging and he's holding the moves. He's doing the moves. He's not hitting anyone with them really. So he's swinging them really big, but he's actually making the misses work.
I think the pull away is good. It was good. Yeah, that was good. Because you responded to me. Everything up until that time was good. Yeah. But after that, he fell back. That's what I came in one move too early, right? Yeah, but that's kind of okay because I still caught you. Your axe. Yeah. If I hadn't have gone on the reason, I'd have been there. Yeah. If he wasn't on the ground, he would have been there.
Do you want to take your hat off?
Cool. Well, cool then, man. Have we got a couple of these then?
Yeah, take it off. Just take the hat off, please. Give these guys a break. Every time, hats off. Get some fresh air, evil.
We used for close-up real weapons. I mean, if you miss someone, your finger is gone, or you have a big cut in your arm.
When we started rehearsing, one of the guys got a wooden sword, and we were starting to rehearse with wooden swords to make sure everyone's in the right place. One of the guys got his head cut open, stitched up, and I mean, you're always going to get that sort of every day. You're going to have an injury somewhere, but hopefully they're very minor, and if everyone's on the ball, they'll be, you know, the smaller they'll be. You're on a sand base, you have metal weapons in your hand, you're chained to someone else. All it needs is someone in the wrong place, a tug, the hand moves, and someone's hit your arm. So, you know, it is really a case of getting the choreography really, really well down so that the guys are really on the ball every time. They have to concentrate every time they come out. It's no good sort of saying, right, we've done it 10 times today, we're okay. Every time you come out, you've got to concentrate, otherwise there is potential for somebody to get very badly hurt.
German got hurt.
I'm fighting with this guy who has a helmet, you know, with a horn and quite a sharp horn, and I go in and, knee him and elbow him. And while I'm elbowing him, he was getting up and turning around like that. And when he was getting up, turning around, he turned around with his head, and the horn of the helmet just went through and got my shoulder and cut deeper.
Hit myself. Hit yourself? Yeah, it's the nose. Yeah, the nose. Luckily, I don't know. No, yeah, they don't cut myself. I'm a gladiator now.
Right with you, Dave. Just do that.
Too close to me. I didn't move. I didn't have time.
Jaimin came at this film, there were no scenes written, really, except him fixing his wound at the beginning. And gradually, Jaimin developed into a very nice little through line on that, talking about afterlife and the importance of that. And so that's how Jaimin literally developed that character throughout the film into a very useful character. So at the end of the day, he has the last word.
I will see you again. But not yet. Not yet.
main Rome would be in Malta. And we went to Malta because I had done a little film on a tank there called White Squall. And I remember going one lunchtime, entered this ruin. I walked in further to find this complex of enormous walls. And then beyond it was a barracks and a parade ground of Romanesque architecture and infrastructure. And I always remembered that and said to Arthur, you know, there's this place.
Something that he knew about, which was an abandoned military fortification, I think which dated originally from the 17th century, with 18th, 19th, and 20th century additions. I think it was last used as a barracks in the 1950s by the British, and has an architectural style which, although isn't truly ancient Roman, is more Napoleonic, but we felt was close enough to ancient Rome for our purposes, and really gave us 50% of our sets. Our set pieces in relation to existing buildings or within existing buildings.
Terry Needham, you know, the first AD is associate producer with Ridley, and Ridley had always seen this place, you know, this old Napoleonic barracks. And when the film came into production, I think, you know, they said, let's go and head over here and look at this place. And, you know, it became an amazing sort of central piece for the our set in Gladiator. I think Troy stole it later and used it as well in Troy. In the center of this Napoleonic fort, they built pillars. We built 1/3 of the Colosseum. We built, you know, barracks of the Rome barracks of Proximo, where he keeps his gladiators. And we built the palace, the imperial palace of the Emperor Commodus. And it became like our studio backlot set, you know. We shot, you know, virtually most of the movie in that location there.
When we finally met our production deadline and the crew arrived on Malta after having filmed in Morocco, there were certain script changes that were ongoing, which made it difficult for them to shoot the sets that were originally scheduled to be ready as planned.
We hadn't gotten the end quite right. We were changing some key scenes. So Ridley would have to step back from all the extras, the tigers, whatever, the unbelievable logistics, and step into this little tent where we would be waiting with the writer, and we're trying to figure out some key turns in the third act. And very stressful for the actors, because sometimes they would get new scenes the night before they were going to work. And then incredibly stressful for the production design, because let's say the scene required some new setting in the palace that we didn't have. So they were scrambling for the next day to dress some bedroom in the palace.
When I was on the location, people would come to me, designers would come to me and say, is such and such a set ever going to be used? And I would say, nope, I'm not writing anything for it, but we've built this, you know. What is happening? And I'd say, well, this. And they'd say, we haven't built that, you know. And is that going to happen? And I would say, I don't know. I'm not the boss. I can tell you what I'm writing, but check with the boss, you know. Very, very disturbing.